Oftentimes, a lot of people who are getting into the infinite banking system and concept, they learn about it in a vacuum. Then how it relates to whatever they're doing, whether they're an entrepreneur or a real estate investor or a W-2 employee.
Instead of just going right out and starting your own thing, go get paid to get an education. Like, go work for someone that's going to pay you and learn the lessons on their dime as opposed to your own.
So you've been in business for a while. When you started out, there was probably something you qualified either from a quantitative or qualitative standpoint as this is success. And then now, a number of years later, how has that changed for you?
Just creating a...
And welcome again to Save Yourself Podcast with Unlimit Wealth. We have some additional people here today. We're excited to share with you guys. We have Chris Walker here. Also, my partner, Mike Schwallie, and I'm Jordan Cole. Excited to get into a couple stories, a little bit of your background, Chris. Hear your, how you got to where you are. So why don't you just jump in, tell us how you got to where you are, both personally and in the business world, and then what you're involved with nowadays, and we can kind of go from there, man.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Honored to be here. So from Greenville, Mississippi originally, small town. My father is an attorney. My parents are still there. Went to the University of Alabama, graduated in 2005. From a young age, kind of always had a little bit of a entrepreneurship type hustle in me from had my own little car wash when I was in middle school to teaching tennis lessons in high school. So always kind of had an itch towards working smarter, not necessarily harder. Went to Alabama, met my wife. We were married in 2008. We have 3 kids, 3 boys, 11, 9, and 16 months. Thought we'd run it back.
Yeah.
It's been fun. It's been a joy. And I own a few businesses. So that wasn't exactly how I thought things would play out, but I've just kind of always wanted to be a part of building teams, impacting culture in a place, and solving problems. So we currently have 2 businesses that are operating and are starting a third here in a few weeks. Downstream Logistics is a last mile home delivery company, and we service Alabama and Georgia. I tell people we deliver things UPS can't. So anything that requires 2 men, and generally we're going inside a home or business. And then midstream, we're a little bit further upstream in the supply chain, is in North Carolina. And we are an apparel distributor, order fulfillment for a lot of the big box retailers, Target, Costco, Sam's, all of them. So, and we're launching we just bought a franchise, a home service franchise, and we're going to launch in Birmingham, Huntsville, Nashville, and Chattanooga. So I'm a glutton for chaos. I have a capacity for chaos and enjoy building teams. So, yeah.
Well, Chris and you and I got some history, man. So Chris and I go way back, and we both worked together for a number of years and helped really build a business. My firm got acquired by a group that Chris was a part of, and together we got to grow a distribution service, and boy, we had some fun traveling across the Midwest and building out some new locations, and it was all new and exciting. And man, I mean, I commend you. You've always had a really good, like you said, you like to grow things with the team mentality. And so go back a little bit for us. When you were at Bama, what were you thinking back then? What career path did you think you were going down that road? Just instead of jumping right into where we are today.
Yeah. So I started out as an engineer major, and realized I enjoyed people more than numbers pretty quickly. So I shifted into finance. Part of my really spiritual development happened halfway through college, and really had a lot of life change. The Lord really did a number on my life in college, and by way of a college ministry. And so right after college, I joined staff with that campus ministry, and learned also during that process, again, the theme of always, my friends would say, I always was up to something. some side hustle. I always had something going on, right? People still give me a hard time about what is it that you got going on now. And I saw that really part of the draw to at least campus ministry is you're having to recruit students, you're having to raise money, you're having to get creative in the way that you draw people in. I mean, it was really being an entrepreneur for the sake of Christ, in the sake of building a ministry. So I learned in that process. I wasn't going to be in ministry the whole time, but I really got excited about not necessarily being the business owner, but hey, I'm really excited about being on a team where I can help influence culture and the team itself. So I came out of college at the time. I mean, this was early 2000s. There wasn't really an entrepreneurship track. I asked, like, how do I do that? There wasn't really any answer to how do you do that. And so it was really then the advice I got was, instead of just going right out and starting your own thing, go get paid to get an education. Like, go work for someone that's going to pay you and learn the lessons on their dime as opposed to your own. And so that's really kind of what got me started. And when I came to work with you and Brad, the opportunity there with Brad was, I'd really like to have somebody come learn my business and help grow and run it. And that's what you and I did. And so it wasn't necessarily that I was just thrilled about being in the moving industry. It was more about the opportunity to learn to operate.
Chris, what were some of the lessons that you were able to learn on his dime, as you said? Like, what were some of those 2 or 3 things that you probably still carry with you to this day and has helped to shape your track to this point?
Yeah, great question. I think one that stands out in particular is I've become, this isn't true for everybody, but I learned that the who was more important than the what. So meaning that I realized that it was more important about the character and the caliber and the guys that I was doing work with than what we were actually doing. And so if we had alignment and strong leadership, we could go dig ditches, we could go do a plumbing company, we could go do finance. Like, with the right group, you could go figure out whatever it is you want to do within reason, right? We couldn't just go be doctors. But in regards to like building a business, it felt like, man, the who is more important than the what. I learned that it takes twice as much money as you usually think that it does. And so that was probably a second thing. Third thing was that growing a business just requires a lot of humility. It just, the part of the business that I worked on with Mike up to that point when Mike and I were employees at the business, just about everything that I was a part of, not because of me, but generally in that season, everything we were a part of was successful. And as I told Mike earlier, then I became the business owner, and it was almost the opposite. Everything we were part of was unsuccessful. And if it wasn't for my ignorant energy that I kind of missed, that's what I was telling Mike earlier, I'm not sure that if I know what I knew now, that I'd go back and do it. But those would probably be the things that.
Yeah, that's so true. I think oftentimes it's easy to get mixed up with thinking that ignorant energy, like you said, that blissful ignorance was confidence, and then now you're maturing into more of a cautious approach towards business, and probably in a good way that'll probably help you avoid a lot of potholes, and that's just part of the maturation process in business.
Sure.
So sometimes we kind of long for those days. I know I still think that when I was first in this business, I think, man, I knew very little, but I thought I knew a lot. And sometimes I wish I still had that superpower. I could just flip that on. But I think, these developments and these things that we have over time mature us. But that's really good. What are some of the things, as you mentioned, you do like to business hop, if I could say that. Sometimes you're just looking for, hey, what's the next challenge? Now that you're X number of years into your business career writ large, what are the elements or characteristics now that you seek out in, let's say, a new venture? Maybe they're the same as what you had in the past. Maybe they're different. But what are those characteristics that you kind of prioritize now when trying to seek out a new business?
Yeah. I think initially, and I say, I've got two partners, and up to this point, there's been some exception to this, but for the most part now, when I think about an operating business, when I say we, I mean us three, right? So I've partnered in other things without them, but for the most part, if we're going to go do an operating business, those guys are coming with me. And so I think initially we're looking for things that have some similar, require some similar muscles, if you will. What Mike did with what we did together was this logistics, really. We were doing a lot of routing and scheduling and using technology we were making money off of being, or not making money, off of being efficient, right? So it was all about efficiency. And so we've looked at businesses that require routing and scheduling. And so what are the things we've learned that we had to be really good at efficiency to make money? That, like, man, if we could bring some efficiency to a business, that to improve would be great, right? So those are the initial things of, like, what are some things that we already do that translate? If it's not a business that can be like midstream, actually kind of was almost like a strap-on from a downstream, and that it was warehousing and people and distribution. Secondly, contrary to our logistics business, I think we're becoming more and more drawn to simple. The logistics thing has been really hard, and with hard creates a high barrier of entry, so there are fewer people in it. But when you can really be operationally excellent, there's some low-hanging fruit in simple. If you can be excellent at being simple, then that's been more of something we've been drawn to as of late. So those are things I think if we were going to acquire, buy, and build, we're going to look at the people side of it. Not in addition to margin and stuff like that, but those are probably some of the initial checklists that we're going through.
That's really good. Well, man, entrepreneur, investor, you own your own business, you own your own buildings. You're pretty diverse in the way you, and going back to a story, and I don't even know if you know this, when you and I were in business together, and I remember I had already made the decision that I was transitioning and moving over to Nowlin. I was already a client of Nowlin Wealth Management, and ultimately met Jordan and the guys here at Unlimit. I was sitting in the office one day, and we had some glass doors, and all of a sudden here comes Brad and Jordan coming in to talk to Chris Walker, and I was like, oh no, how does he know that I'm moving? And nobody knew that I was at the time already working on my certifications to move on over. But it was an interesting day, and I say that because you got to get to know these guys early on, build a relationship with them, and how did that transition work for you? What was this, moving over into transitioning into the infinite banking concept? What did it mean to you early on compared to maybe what it means to you now? What have you learned about it?
Yeah, so I think a trait that I've seen in my personality over the years is that I'm not one that's going to be, if the masses are going to the right, I'm not necessarily going to the left, but I'm probably not going to go completely to the right with them. I just like being slightly different. And so I think part of the appeal is that the traditional investment appeal of, stock market and for like all that kind of stuff, like just one, I didn't have, although I was a finance major, like I still just something about it. I don't know if it wasn't exciting or I just wasn't drawn to it. And probably still had some lack of understanding in it. And so I think one of the things is I've always just kind of wanted to put my money where things that I understand. And so I think when the concept was first presented, I was like, oh man, this is creative. It's a little bit different. It's not going left, to my analogy, right? It's going right, but with a slightly different path. And it kind of puts me, so to speak, in control and gives me access. And so I think when I first saw it, I was like, oh man, okay, this checks a lot of boxes for me, who's going to want to always have access to money to be able to fund a new thing. And I think now it's in a position to where like it's just so much a part of my thinking and my approach now that I've talked about that earlier, like how has that evolved and changed? And so, I think just the idea of having access to it initially was like, man, this could be really great as I think about building multiple businesses, wanting to have a portfolio of small service businesses. Can be being built all along the way. And so, now I see it as very much part of a tool in the tool belt to accomplish the things that we want to go do. If it results in funding a business, acquiring a business.
Oftentimes, a lot of the people we meet or who are investigating getting into the infinite banking system and concept, they understand IBC or they learn about it in a vacuum, and it takes some time potentially for them to really understand, okay, I understand infinite banking. I get, a life insurance policy is overfunded. It's with a mutual company, dividend paying, all those things, but then how it relates to whatever they're doing, whether they're an entrepreneur or a real estate investor or a W-2 employee. How have you kind of reconciled that over the years? I mean, because you started out, you read Nelson's book, you learned about the concept kind of the old-fashioned way that we still encourage people to do to this day. And then you started a policy, and then you started several since then as you've bought and sold businesses. How have you kind of reconciled the relationship between, okay, there's this life insurance policy that holds cash. I know I can put it there. I know I can get it. And then I've got all these businesses over here. Can you walk me through kind of that reconciliation process over time as you've learned more about it and also put it into practice?
Yeah, I hope so. I think initially I saw it as a really just to think simply and practically. When I first thought about it, we started talking about the things that I spent a lot of money on as the business owner. At the time, I think we owned 12 moving trucks. And so I was carrying a lot of debt on trucks. I said, man, it'd be awesome if I could be the bank on these trucks. And so the initial idea was that I would fund a policy that would be the bank to borrow from, to really start a leasing company that I could buy the trucks from. And then I could also give myself control as the leasing company. Moving can be a very seasonal business, and so cash flow can be tight in the winter and abundant in the summer. And so I could then structure the payments on those leases to where they follow the cash flow, right? And so initially it was kind of like, I just locked into that simple idea of this is how I will create the finance company. Exactly. And then through challenges in the business, I had to use the cash to fund the business. We never got to the finance company part, right? And so I think the way that it's I think evolved to some degree is seeing, I think initially I was you hear life insurance and you can sometimes just lose people at life insurance, right? And so it's like, if you can get past that it's life insurance and actually think about the way that this tool is being used, you actually will then almost completely forget that it is actually life insurance. That's like the benefit of the life insurance piece is like way down the list of things that are great about it, I think. And so when I started to really fully understand the impact of funding it, borrowing it, and having then multiple buckets and then having the ability to borrow from to do things, I think that's been part of the evolution of that for me. That it's a place now that I can park money. I can also take some risk and not feel that I've put my family in a complete, I can take a risk with some boundaries, I think, as a result of that. I'm not having to go take money out of, I don't know.
Leverage another asset.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah. Where somebody else is in control.
That's right.
Yeah. You're not going to call your own note in case things go bad.
That's right. That's exactly right.
If you're the bank.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a good way to put it. So in your discovery and as you've used it over years, obviously you got to store capital somewhere, right? And it sounds like you found that realization. I've got to park it somewhere. Why not use a more efficient warehouse? And that's really what infinite banking can be for a lot of people. Do you have an example recently that maybe you've used your policy, or you have a plan to buy another business or do something new now, or maybe it's an investment opportunity outside of your current businesses?
Yeah. Well, just one additional comment I think I made that I was, for someone that's wired like me, who's really, and I think all of us to some degree are in this way, right? But I'm kind of betting on myself to some degree, right? And so I think what aligned also with this for me is that it allowed me to bank on myself and bet on myself in a way that's like, it's not that I should certainly be conservative, and I am in a way of like having money in other places that are growing without my influence. But I think if I'm out to create wealth or create money for myself, I was ultimately kind of betting on myself for that, and this aligned with that. Most recently, so we've acquired this franchise, and so it's a newer franchise. And so me and my two other partners, there's a capital call to go pay the franchise fee and buy a Sprinter van and all this kind of stuff. And so that's been an example here recently where we've borrowed from that to get this new thing funded. And so we've also recently bought a lake house. And so we've been able to use that as part of it, particularly with at the moment with mortgage rates being higher. We're able to take a little bit lower cash position personally to put more cash in the house until we feel like it's to pay the rate game. Like just gives us the ability to kind of watch rates and play the game a little bit. So those are examples, I think, of ways that we can pull money out of one thing, put it in a place, and not feel like we've really put our net worth or our cash really ultimately at risk, right? So
Gives you a little bit of buffer too when you start up one of those new businesses. You have time to get that business up and running. You don't feel the obligation, I've got to refill my bucket, I've got to get that money back in there. You want to, obviously, because you got more expenditures down the road, but by doing that control factor sounds like it's a big deal for you. That's why we got this started. Right?
yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, oftentimes people will kind of bellyache a little bit about, oh man, if I borrow from the policy, that I like that concept, but then I have to pay it back. And they really, they kind of look ahead and project out and think that's going to be a big burden on me mentally and financially to have a payment to myself, which, as you know, there is no payment structure that's regimented. It's really just as like for instance, I remember one of your earlier businesses, we used the policy as a big source of funding. And then when that business sold, well, then here comes the windfall. We replenish the capital. So I'm assuming, and this is kind of a rhetorical question just to kind of help people kind of navigate that mentality, but you've never felt, oh man, I have a payment back to myself, or I have this debt on the, that's not something that you see it that way. Just the way you've been able to kind of shift your mindset. Hey, I don't view it as life insurance per se. It's just a place to store capital.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think that's probably layer 2 of once I get past it as life insurance, right. And now I want to let you talk to me about it.
Yeah.
And then you hear that piece of, well, it's going to cost me money to use my money. It's like, once you understand that that's going to be the case regardless of how you do it. And then you start to see the benefit of that. It's like, okay, yeah, but you were able to kind of get past those things. It's, but I do think those were, I don't know if they're massive hurdles, but I think those are some of the speed bumps and kind of getting comfortable with this idea.
Anything new, you have to take time to understand it, feel it, use it. Once you get past that, typically it's one of those, it's caught. It's more of a caught strategy, not taught. You finally, the light bulb goes off and you begin to use it. So to move forward, what's next for you personally outside of infinite banking? It sounds like the franchise is getting started up. Got the new one in the house, a lot going on. This is from our history. This is a season for you that we really ramp up in the distribution and moving world. So.
Yeah. So I'm, as my partners would say, I'm great from 0 to 1, and I'm great at creating chaos. Mike was a part of at times some of the chaos I would create. So I've had to find guys that are really good at creating Groundhog Day every day, and they're operators, and they're they love that. And so we jokingly say that. About the time I start getting bored is when my partners really start to shine. And so we're at 0 with the franchise. We just made a job offer to our guy in Nashville yesterday that's going to help launch there. So we're aiming for an April 1 launch date for Birmingham. And we've already started making some quasi-sales calls, gotten a great response for what we're doing. So I'm kind of, in some degree, when I transitioned out of the moving business and was only in the logistics business, I was, as you know, Mike, it was all B2B. So I'm not dealing with consumers as much. I'm not wearing a marketing hat, not wearing it was all about how well do we operate. And so I'm going back into local networking and consumers, and we'll target property managers largely. And so I didn't realize how much atrophy I'd experienced in that muscle, because for the past 10 years we've just been focused on being operationally excellent and efficient. So there's a little bit of a reset for me at the moment, which creates some of that excitement of, oh man, I kind of get back in the trenches again and be selling a local product. And so I'm excited about that. And we've got a team of one employee. So the idea of building a team, also, those are things that excite me. So I'm kind of not officially, but stepping, not in the day to day of downstream as much, and my partner's kind of taken that over. And so as I'll create chaos over here, he'll be transitioning to helping me with the new thing in time. So that's what's happening at the moment. We're really excited about being in this season of really the dream of just having a portfolio of small businesses is we're kind of in the development of that at the moment. So it's a fun time. Family's in a fun place. Our boys are at that really awesome season of, I feel like I may have told Jordan this recently, but I feel like that 7 to 11 is like a season for my boys. And I don't know that I will miss like being an infant or being a toddler. I think I'll miss 7 to 11. It's like a sweet spot.
I've always told people 5 to 12.
Yeah.
Those are my
goals.
goals.
Man.
Yeah. Sorry,
so
daughters. Both my daughters are past that age. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like with my 11-year-old, I'm starting to see the end is near, some of the preteen comments. I don't know what I'm talking about and all that.
Which you don't, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's right.
exactly.
He's got it figured out.
Yeah. And
Something about blissful ignorance comes to mind.
Yeah. And they're also entering into that age of like asking like, wait, Dad, what do you do for work? And, so we're starting to have conversations about some of that kind of stuff. So yeah, we're
Chris,
a fun time.
We really appreciate you coming on. We like to end with kind of a high level question just to kind of gauge the perspective of anybody we have on, and that would be in this case. Obviously, you've been in business for a while. When you started out, there was probably something you qualified either from a quantitative or qualitative standpoint as this is success. And then now, X number of years later, how has that changed for you? So what you would have considered success back in the day, how has that qualification in your mind or what you characterize as success, how has that changed over time?
Yeah, it's changed a lot, honestly. I had... when I was first getting into owning a business or even running and building a business, I had some peers in town that were more in the startup space and was in some business groups with these guys. And those three in particular have gone out to do some amazing things and sold their businesses for an abundance amount of money. And so there was a season when I felt like, man, I'm in this community of guys that are just really being successful, and I'm experiencing quite the opposite. And so I got in this like bad comparison game that really like took me to a dark place, and really kind of was really like shaped a lot by that experience, and realized, man, that the comparison game is just not a healthy place to be. And it also started to shape like what I thought about success. Like, I think I thought success meant that it had to be some large number. And a phrase that I've mentioned to young guys before, talking about glory in the grind. Like, I feel like God is glorified in going to work, doing a good job, paying my bills, raising my, like some of the most ordinary things, like just doing that well is still a very honoring and glorifying thing, right? And so I think for me, that has been something that I've had to kind of ground myself with, of like, man, just creating a place that's honoring to the Lord where people can enjoy their work, have an impact on the people they work with and the people they serve, that is something that really excites and motivates me to say, man, to have places where people really thrive in their job. That to me now, not that that's the end, but my view of success is being more and more shaped by the people side of it and less more about the money side of it. And so we just naturally keep score by the money side of it, right? And I just remember being in that dark place of comparison. It's like I just so badly wanted to listen to a podcast where somebody told me that they failed. Right. Like I got tired of listening to like these really hard stories of guys being really successful. I'm like, can somebody just tell me it didn't work? Like, and then that their life is still okay? Like, because it may not. Like I was in a sense like this may not work. And there's still days like this. There's part of it like I'm not sure this is going to work. And so I'm just like I just wanted to hear like, yeah, it may not work, and that's okay. Like, you don't die at the end, you know. Like, that's right. So anyway, I think that's like helped shape part of my view now of success is less about it doesn't mean that we still don't want to be profitable and all that, but that's not the end all be all anymore. Like I think it was early on, and the idea of building businesses. So.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, sure.
Appreciate your perspective, and you just kind of sharing your heart and sharing your perspective and all that stuff. So we'll wrap there for Unlimit Wealth and Save Yourself Podcast. I'm Jordan, along with Mike and Chris. We'll bid you guys farewell for now. Thanks.